Hey, what's up guys, Sir Emanon here, and welcome to another deck profile on the channel. This time it's going to be a deck list from my team's 3v3 LCS top 8 finish from this past weekend. This is going to be Sky Striker, piloted by my friend Evan. And yeah, you guys seem to be interested in looking at the rogue decks, being Striker and Dragon Maid, that my friends did play, which I will 100% admit is going to be far more interesting than just seeing yet another Dragon Link list. So if you guys like that kind of content, then this is going to be the series of videos for you. The Dragon Maid list will be up on the channel pretty shortly, I can imagine, and I'll bring John on the channel to probably talk about it. But unfortunately, I can't have Evan up here because he's a very busy guy. As I noted in the last video on the Dragon Link deck profile, he's currently in med school, so he's doing a lot of work right now. He's very busy, and we had to reserve this weekend to play the LCS like far in advance to be able to get the chance to do it. So yeah, definitely. Obviously he has stuff to do, and I'm not going to interfere with that. But yeah, what I can do rather, is just go ahead and kind of talk about the theory behind the deck building process. I did help kind of bounce ideas off of him for him to kind of just understand the format a bit better. Because for some context, he did play quite competitively for quite some time. He has a couple of ARG tops actually, with Zoo and with like Striker with 3 Engage and 3 Hornet even. So like way back when it first came out. So he's very comfortable with Striker, which is the deck that I pretty much said, hey, the deck is still viable to some degree. So I figured you might as well try and pilot it because he's one of the more talented Striker players that I do know. So that's kind of like the baseline for where we started off with. And a lot of the time we spent kind of preparing for the tournament was just me catching him back up to speed with everything that he missed since he left the game in Nats 2019 format. That was the last event that he played. So right in the heart of TOS format, being a Thunder, Orcus, Striker, Salad format. So everything between then and now were cards that he was just unfamiliar with. So things like, he missed the entirety of Spiral's Resurgence. He missed Adamantipator completely. I didn't know what the Eldritch cards did, or the Dogmatica cards, or like a lot of the new Dragon stuff, the Infernobles as well. So like pretty much every single deck in the entire format besides Dino, he just doesn't really have a lot of familiarity with. So with that in mind, we had to kind of like talk about what the format was, which was really good because it allowed us to kind of just get a sense of and a general grasp of where the format was as a whole. So yeah, after kind of doing that, since Striker is essentially in an anti-meta position right now, we kind of formulated ways to try and play with that in mind. So Evan's first idea, and this was kind of the idea that we stuck with for a very long time, was to kind of just play the way that people are considering Striker to be standard. If you guys are noticing the deck list being empty here again, I am going to once again just be doing the live deck building sort of thing that you guys have seen on the channel for the past couple of videos as far as deck profiles are concerned at this point. But what I do want to do is show to you guys some of the past ideas that we had. So this first list is like very standard, like I was talking about, which is like a lot of hand traps. Just go second and break the board. So this is like a sample. We had a lot of like minor tweaks here and there, but this is like one of the lists that we were testing. So you can see lots of hand traps, like 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 hand traps. At some points he was playing 20, if you can believe it. Just a lot of hand traps. Go second. Try and either get a Ray or a Rose, like one of the Striker monsters. Either that or just sit a Mystic Mine and hope to win from there. The problem is that we found that a lot of the hand traps, especially the low impact ones, just didn't do enough against combo. Even if you draw them in like multiples, like even if you draw like Valor Imperm, sometimes it's not enough, especially against Dragon. But even Infernoble with like Dolphin ripping stuff out of your hand, and like if the player is smart, they can like play around certain hand traps. So like what we found was that the problem with this kind of a list was that you're not guaranteed to even stop them. And what's worse about it is that like if you don't find a way to actually have a play starter, then it can be hard to like win the game. Because even if you have something like a Mystic Mine, if you don't have a Striker monster to kind of like force stuff through, then your opponent can kind of just still play the game if they can negate mine, like at the end of like maybe a Savage or something. So even though there's cards to possibly force that, like Burners and Widow and even Imperm, it still sometimes just isn't enough. We did a lot of testing versus Dragon since I was playing Dragon, and through testing, this kind of a hand trap lineup in the main deck going second sometimes actually just wasn't enough to win the game, which is kind of crazy. So we actually dropped this idea after a long time. It was working quite well, but I think it was also because I was kind of getting better at playing against this deck, because I played a lot against this deck. So it kind of allowed me to get better at playing around hand traps too. But we figured that a lot of the players would be very, very smart and practiced on their decks as well, given that it's a competitive tournament, of course. So if I was able to kind of figure out how to play through like combinations of 2 to 3 of these, then so would most of the better players in the field. So we figured that this just wouldn't be good enough to actually combat the format. And if you're wondering like why some of the random like 1 of numbers, it's just that we want to minimize the low impact hand traps, with the exception of Valor because of Celine and Imperm to play around triple tactics. But yeah, like we found that even diversifying the hand trap lineup like this and opening as many as we could, going second, just wasn't good enough, which is kind of crazy to think about. But this was like the original version, so like version 1. Version 2 was a different approach of going second, because we thought, okay, so maybe you can still go second because the striker cards are inherently good at breaking boards, but instead let's just leave in like the biggest impact hand traps, being Nib and Gamma, and just play a lot of board breakers instead. Because like one of the biggest fears that we had was Smoke Grenade from Infernoble and possibly even Dragon Link. So the second kind of idea was, okay, let's just try and let our opponent maybe play, unless we can just have a blowout hand trap. And if we don't open a blowout hand trap, then it's fine, because we can have combinations of like Mystic Mine and Dark Ruler and Lightning Storm and all these types of cards. And then the game plan would be to like get Spells Engrave, use Widowinker or Mind Control or Shark Cannon to try and get another monster on board, combine with the Striker Link to make a Verite Anaconda, and then go for Dragoon. So that was kind of the other concept. The problem with this concept was kind of just that your opponent would still have windows to be able to stop what you're doing if they are able to resolve Smoke Grenade and kind of look at your hand and see exactly what they have to play around, which isn't very good. But also, like, if you don't open like Dark Ruler specifically with one of these cards, then it's pretty hard to actually kind of play past the board. And also, one of the big problems is like, if you let your opponent kind of resolve their full combo, then there's going to be parts of the board that you can't interact with. Specifically against dragons, it's hard to interact with like both the full board and the Buster Lock. Like, you have to have outs for all of it. And like against Noble, you have to kind of like be prepared for them like ripping additional cards out of your hand, or like playing hand traps. Like Dark Ruler, I'm getting a little bit into the specifics here, but like Dark Ruler against that deck may be a little bit better, but against combo, it's just very, very hard to kind of justify having to open very specific combinations of cards if you don't see a hand trap in order to actually even play the game at all. So we scrapped this idea too, and we did recognize that there were other decks in the format, like Dino and Invoked Dogmatica were like both very, very popular. And like we didn't test as much against that because we just anticipated a lot of Dragon Link and some Infernoble. But Invoked Dogmatica did end up being popular, and we actually did test that towards the end, and we also found that this kind of list was just not as good against that kind of a deck. It sacrificed a lot of the control matchup potential just to play a lot against combo, which is pretty fine if you're thinking about like it from the context of the competitive format and sort of what players are thinking about playing or bringing into the event, if you know what I mean. But this is kind of just not really a well-rounded list, and it requires a lot to actually be able to play the game. So we did decide to do something completely different, and that is kind of to just go first and try and just set up ignorant floodgates, just be like as degenerate as we could, and hope that it would be good enough. So it seems kind of weird because Striker is really, really known right now to be a go second deck. Which is entirely fair because all the cards like Afterburner and like Widow Steel and all these cards are very, very good at breaking boards, and like Hayate helps facilitate that very, very nicely. But we figured that like you could like concede possibly the die roll. It is kind of a risky choice to make it so that now you have to win the die roll a bit more to be able to be achieving your win condition. But the thing is that you're not even guaranteed to perform what you want to do if you're playing one of the dedicated go second lists that I showcased before. So we figured that having just very, very much stronger blowout cards, going going first would be better at stopping combo decks, and even a more wide variety of decks for that matter, because the floodgates that we chose were good against even the control matchups. So that's kind of what we ended up deciding on. So even though it seems a bit riskier to kind of lean more on the die roll, again, we thought that the payoff was worth it because individually, hand traps are weaker impact than most of the floodgates in this game. So that is kind of what we sort of went with. So we can start off with the Sky Striker engine. I know that was kind of a long introduction, but it was kind of needed to provide context as far as what we were doing here. All right, so we have our, of course, engine cards. So we have 3 Ray, 3 Rose, we have the Hornet drones, and then we could put a Rhoda here too. So these are the 8 striker monsters. Everyone was testing between 2 and 3 Rose for a while. But the thing is that you just need to see a play. That's kind of just plain and simple. And spoiler alert, there is no Gamma in the main deck here. So it's not really a thing where you can like hold a monster and then like if you open a monster plus Gamma, it's worse because then you like have to hold a monster to be able to resolve Gamma. If you're going first, like cutting Gamma kind of just removes that conflict entirely. So what we could do instead was just play all 8 of the striker monsters, or like ways to get there basically, and have just the most consistent way to play the game as possible. Because our idea was simply, or his idea rather, was just, either you play striker or you just play floodgates with protection. And you could also do combinations with like striker plus floodgates too. Like striker works pretty well with a lot of different floodgates, as is pretty notorious. If you recall the NAWCQ 2019 list by Ray Dye, he played a lot of floodgates as well. So it's kind of like that concept. Because you gotta think about it, right? Like Striker was playing no hand traps in that format where Danger Thunder was very prominent. So it's kind of like he took inspiration from that quite a bit, which makes sense, because that's kind of one of the last formats that he played in. But yeah, just these engine cards, pretty self-explanatory. And then for the rest of the Striker cards, we decided on, for some reason, when I type Striker in the description box, it doesn't show everything. I have to type it in the name box. But yeah, it's a 3 Widow Anchor. He played 1 copy of Multi-Roll, 1 Shark Cannon, 1 Afterburner, and 1 copy of Area, if I remember correctly. I'll have a list to be able to compare side by side in case I get this wrong. But I'm pretty sure I remember the list. So yeah, these are the striker cards that he ultimately ended up playing on. He cut Area for a very, very long time, like entirely cut it. And I was kind of surprised at that when he ran the idea by me, but as we played more and more, it made a lot of sense, because without, a lot of like the really, really good striker cards, i.e. Engage, you're not really able to dig as consistently as you were able to previously. There's not really a lot of point in playing the card if it doesn't really actively get you advantage. Because you're not really ever guaranteed to add a striker to your hand with such a low density of them. It does have the nice utility, however, of outing your own Mystic Mine, which we'll get to. But also, it's nice to be able to send with roll on occasion, just to be able to access another monster if you need to. Because spoiler alert, again, there's going to be Dragoon in this list as well, so making Verite is pretty important. So yeah, we figured that this was a decent lineup. For Afterburner and Shark Cannon, it's kind of interesting. So Shark Cannon, if you're going first, would act more of a defensive card in a lot of cases. Of course, it can be used as a push, but if you're going first, it's not as strong of an interruption as the other cards that we can play, like Floodgates and like even Widow Anchor and stuff. Just because by the time you're able to use Shark Cannon to get a lot of value out of it, it's going to be, versus a lot of the combo decks, it's going to be on Metal Marcher, whatever you target off that. So if you Shark Cannon hit it there, it could be too late in a lot of instances. So we figured that it's good if you pair it with other cards, but it's not the card that you want to see as far as interruptions are concerned. Yeah, Widow and Multi-Roll should be obvious, by the way. These are pretty staple. Afterburner was cut to 1. He was playing 2 when we were testing the blind second lists, because it's just good at breaking boards and forcing things. But when you're going first, you just want this as a toolbox instead of actually hard drawing it all the time. So yeah, we figured that this was a pretty sufficient enough lineup. It's definitely not like a big lineup, but we thought it would suffice to get the job done. So yeah, I kind of was mentioning this just now, but his other kind of a win condition was Dragoon. So he played 3 Red Ice Fusion, the Red Ice Black Dragon, obviously, and the Dark Magician to pair with it. So yeah, Striker Dragoon is a bit of a concept that people are playing with on DB. He didn't feel comfortable going all the way with Insight. I did run the idea by him. But he just didn't want to draw a lot of like dead fusions later on into the game, which makes a lot of sense. Because like if you're playing a high striker count anyway, then you have a fair amount of play starters because this bumps your starter count up to effectively 11, which is a decent amount to get to. And really, what Dragoon's role is to apply pressure while also protecting the floodgates. And again, we were talking about like floodgates being kind of just the primary win con. And that is, just really the game plan is to stick to floodgates and try and win that way. So yeah, we also figured that since a lot of people are cutting Dragoon, I was telling him like Dragoon is surprisingly not popular right now. We don't really have to worry a lot about people packing outs for it, especially in the main deck. Like people will be able to play through it possibly eventually, but that's why we actually decided to go with a copy of Magicalized Fusion as well. So Evan opted to play 2 copies of Verte Anaconda. I guess I should just put the Dragoon stuff in the side or in the extra as well. So 2 Verte and 2 Dragoon. Where is it? There it is. So yeah, this was kind of like the thought process is that even if the first one gets outed, it's easy to make a second one because like you could possibly hard draw Red Ice Fusion or even make it with Verte later on if you need to. Because Evan a lot of the time would with his Hayate send a copy of Hornet Drones and add it to make like the other striker links to be able to just go Verte that way. And it ended up being a pretty effective game plan on his part. So yeah, like the idea is just to play Dragoon, just control until you can get your striker engine on live to be able to try and close out the game later. Or sometimes, honestly, if your opponent can't out Dragoon plus Floodgates, like I can get you there. Like there are some situations where your opponent just doesn't have outs, and you take those, right? That's kind of just the whole game plan, even like with Floodgates as well, right? So now we get to go to the fun part, which is the Floodgates that everyone loves. So we'll start off with the Floodgate that might be the weirdest one in a blind first list, which is a Mystic Mine at 3. This is a hedge for going second, but also it's not bad in a lot of cases if you're going against combo to sit on like a striker link plus a mine, because if they want to commit, it's kind of hard for them to kind of play through the mine. Like you could literally kind of mine lock yourself almost by going like activate mine, summon a striker link, and then pass. Because what that does is it makes it so that your opponent has to either give you another turn by like summoning one monster, passing, and letting the mine die, or they don't play into it and you just get more ways to like draw into other resources. You'll eventually be able to draw other copies of mine or area possibly, or obviously the terraforming. And that is a fairly good enough win condition a lot of the time to surprisingly just win the game, even if you do open it going first. Now, ideally, you would want to open the other floodgates that we're playing, but he didn't really see this as that much of a conflict. And again, like if in cases where you do lose the die roll and you are able to kind of like still stick a mine on the board, then it's good, especially against a lot of the Dragon Link variants that were not playing the Violent Cube, which I didn't really see Violent Cube at all for this LCS. Because we all played against a fair amount, like all 3 of us did, and we didn't really get smoke grenaded like at all, from what I can recall. So this ended up being pretty good because like nobody's playing outs to this. So like, kind of similar. The whole idea is that like people are just not playing outs to the cards that Evan's playing, right? Like nobody's playing outs in the main deck to Dragoon for the most part. Nobody's playing outs to mine. Like nobody's playing outs to back row in general in the main deck because like people are expecting combo and like Dino and stuff. So yeah, like you can honestly just sit on mine and win the game. It's kind of just that simple. This is like a really random thought, by the way, but I've kind of just been lingering on this for a while. Back to Shark Cannon, just very, very briefly. It is good against like the Dino matchup, for example. Hitting Misk is good. But again, like we have other floodgates to kind of facilitate that matchup. I don't know why I was thinking about that the whole time, but I just wanted to say it. But yeah, we have that, and we also have a Metaverse as well, because he is blinding first. So this is another way to actually get access to mine, just if you want to sit in it. So that makes a lot of sense as well. And then other floodgates, we played fun cards that are a very good part of the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game. So we got 3 copies of Summon Limit and 3 copies of There Can Be Only One. Very interactive Yu-Gi-Oh right here. Yeah, like these are some of the best floodgates just in general this format, because not a lot of decks can really play through them. Warrior and Noble have, or sorry, Warrior, or what am I saying? Infernoble and Dragon both have a very, very hard time against There Can Be Only One. And Summon Limit. It's like hard to just pack out. It's like, admittedly, you know, they can summon big monsters and, you know, beat you down with Summon Limit, but between, you know, Ray floating as well as Dragoon, it's hard to like push past it. Like if those are the ways that you can kind of supplement your floodgates. So that's, again, the idea is like it's not just to flip a floodgate and like have it be there by itself, because you eventually will die to just beat sticks. So you just protect the floodgate with an annoying boss monster or an annoying monster that always floats, right? So yeah, that's kind of just the idea, which is you know, yeah, that's Yu-Gi-Oh for you. Either you play combo and you try and kill your opponent immediately that way, or you play this kind of thing and hope that your opponent just doesn't have the out to it. All right, so we also can talk about other cards that kind of help facilitate this strategy in some particular way, shape, or form. So the first card to talk about is Infinite Impermanence, actually. So we were deliberating between Strike, Judgment, and like this card in the main. I was pulling for Strike a lot because I was thinking, you know, flipping a Floodgate and then chaining Strike to whatever negation they have is very, very good if you are going second, because it's a good way to actually wipe the board. Evan just wanted a more versatile card, like Infinite Impermanence, because it is a hand trap. And it's a way to be able to, you know, kind of play with, like, if you have this, it doubles up with Widow Anchor. At that point, it basically serves the same purpose. So we went with that, and clearly worked out for him. And I think that it makes sense, you know, looking back in it, because you don't really want to have Strike going second if you, like, don't open one of these specific floodgates, because at that point, it's a lot harder to kind of achieve your win condition. But like Imperm can kind of let you at least navigate the board a little bit, just so you can like go, you can still have those like options of going second, kind of like the second list that I showcased at the beginning, but like you can still go like Imperm something, Widow something, even if they full combo you, like Imperm something, Burner something, excuse me, and then drop a Mystic Mine or drop a Red Ice Fusion, and then just like clear the board. So yeah, like there's situations like that where, you know, this card is just more versatile. It's lower impact to be sure, but it can still help out. It definitely does still help out a lot more going second in situations where you don't specifically have There Can Be Only One to supplement it. So I think he made the right call of not going with Strike, and this was a good choice on his end. The next card is what he thought was just the only remaining good hand trap to play in this list, which is 3 Nibiru. Again, like even though it is a dedicated blind first list, it's actually fine to play this card, because if your opponent somehow manages to like break the board, especially post side, this can still be a good like contingency backup option, even if you're going first. If you're going second, of course, you want to not auto lose. It is a lot harder to draw go second cards when you're not playing as many of them, but you have Imperm, you have Nib, you have Mystic Mine, and you have the Striker Engine still that is natively good going second, even if you're playing less of them, like even if you're playing like not 2 Afterburner, for example. So it's not like you're cutting down that much. In effect, you're not cutting down that much on the Striker card, or sorry, the go second kind of capable cards, because a lot of the deck is already kind of able to facilitate that and accomplish those goals in their own right. So because of this, we figured that having just Nibiru Imperm is sufficient enough for hand traps, because you have a very, very high impact hand trap that is one of the only ones that can single-handedly stop combo players' turns. And then you have Imperm, which can double as a go second card or a way to protect your floodgates from things like Levianeer, for example. So yeah, those are kind of just the options that he decided. And then the last dedicated go first card, which I saved to the end because it's the most interesting one, I think, that a lot of people will find pretty cool, is he actually main decked 3 copies of Torrential Tribute. So this is a good one to kind of talk about. So this is another card that if you pair with something like an Imperm or a Widowmaker, or even like a There Can Be going second, you can actually wipe the board because your opponent will probably commit more to the board in order to actually kill you, because Dragon Link doesn't actually put lethal on board turn 1. With Noble, it's a little different, but like you can still possibly get away with this because you're not extra deck locked. So like you can possibly go like Ray into a Striker Link and then float, have like TT, just be able to kill the board, and that's kind of just the end of it. It's also just like a really good card going first because it helps with their floodgates, because you could just, you know, kind of clear any errant threats. If you don't open a floodgate, it can just be like another Nibiru essentially, right? If you're going first. And again, like going second, it just pairs well with like the other kind of negation type cards, to where you can sort of just deal with whatever things would threaten the TT if they go to commit. And that's kind of just the end of it. So yeah, we really did find that in testing. We were actually testing Needle Sealing, and just a whole bunch of other kind of like cards that would serve sort of as both good, very good going first interruption type cards, but also able to clear the board going second, and ultimately determine that TT was the best option. So yeah, that's going to do it for the main deck. It's 41. You'll notice no Desires in this list, primarily because of the Red Ice Fusion stuff. You can't really afford to be banishing it if that's a big part of your win con, which it is here. And there were times where Evan was talking about missing Desires, not throughout the tournament, but in testing. But in the end, I think that it was fine, because like all you really need to draw is going first, one of like ideally these 12 being Red Ice Fusion, Summon Limit, There Can Be, and Torrential. Ideally a combination of 2 of these, and then like you could pair it with a Striker monster if you don't open like Red Ice Fusion, for example, and then, you know, just kind of win the game just from there. It's a very, very, you know, kind of flip floodgate, me win game strategy. But I mean, we found that was the most effective way to play Striker, at least we thought, given the field and just given the way the format was shaping up to be and just how our testing went. The extra deck is literally just the Striker Links. I should just put the Striker Links here, but it's literally 3 of the best ones and then 1 of the utility ones. Nothing too much to say. Kinda is needed if you go second, because you would go like Hayate attack, like I mentioned earlier. He sent Hornet Drones a lot. Kagari back to Hornet Drones, make Haina, use Hornet Drones, make Shizuku, and then go into Verte, because Vakari's affect monsters, so the Drones token wouldn't work. So that's like one of the common plays to do going second. Zeke is, you know, it's there for just utility, especially like if you have Nib, or something of that, something to that effect. And yeah, it's pretty cut and dry for the extra. And for the side deck, this is where we kind of packed more going second power, as well as just cards to deal with other matchups. So he opted to play Gamma in the side. Still a high impact hand trap, dedicated if you're dedicated going second, but he didn't want to main it for the conflicts that I listed earlier. Specifically, like you don't want to be in a situation where like you open a monster with Gamma. Like it's worse than if you open a monster with Red Ice Fusion, because like Red Ice Fusion guarantees that you have at least some pressure on the board, whereas like with Gamma, if you're not summoning a card, you're putting yourself back a turn, kind of. Whereas like this doesn't really do that. So yeah, we figured that it was fine to put Gamma in the side deck. Also, like the conflict with There Can Be Only One is kind of a thing. So yeah, just if you don't want to be put in a situation where you can't use, you know, you don't have too many blanks essentially in your hand. And like this in the main deck would kind of add to that a bit, especially when he's binding first. He was also asking me how good Lancia was this format, and I still think Lancia is a pretty good card. It's good in the Nino matchup. It's good against. It's pretty good against the invoked Dogmatica deck. Like stopping that portion of the engine is, you know, pretty nice when you can kind of just delay yourself a turn. Because like the thing with normal Striker lists, right, is that cards like Droll and Lancia don't really. They're not really as good in Striker in particular, because what you're trying to do is like break their board, but not like deter them from just committing resources. So like, for example, if you Droll them and then they just pass, right? If you're playing normal go second Striker right now, you're not really going to be able to kill your opponent. So in those cases, like you basically just gave them another turn to set up without them having to commit that hard to the board. Same deal with Lancia, right? If like they open like I don't know Chaos Space or like Red MD or something, or sorry Black Metal for Red MD, like you can Lancia them, but like if you're going second, then you're not really able to kill them. But in this deck, what it does is that it allows you to buy you a turn so that you can set up your go first plan. Like you're basically trading a card in your hand to start off with like the rest of your 5 cards. So it's like the same thing as if you're going first, except you get a battle phase so you can use Hayate. But like you're able to like go and set your floodgates, which are much more permanent ways to prolong the game. Whereas the go second cards just don't really do that. Like if you have hand traps, like once you use a hand trap, it's it's kind of just done, right? So that's kind of just the logic behind being able to play a card like Lancia, where you ordinarily wouldn't be able to in like the combo matchups. So yeah, definitely pretty strong again against Dino. Like normally buying you a turn if Dino sees you're going first, then they're definitely going to consider going first themselves post side. So like if you want to stop them bringing out like Dolka or UCT, well not Dolka sorry, but like UCT in particular, then it's a fairly good option to be able to do so. So yeah, like even though like this isn't as strong as it might be in other decks, or like, it might not be the strongest hand trap in the format, it still has enough coverage that we felt it was where it justified its position. And then the next was another Go second card, which is Pankratops. This is pretty staple, as is Feather Duster. Just universally good cards. And then I kind of convinced Evan to play Cosmic as well, just because like Invoke Dogmatica is still pretty popular, and this deck, it doesn't lose that hard to win it necessarily, but only if you are able to just hard draw Red Ice Fusion. Like when you are stuck on your striker plays, then Winda can hinder you quite a bit. So you can chain this to Schism, and that's cool. Hitting punishments is also kind of nice. Just like generic stuff. And then lastly, for a going first card, like post side, if you know you're going first, that's when he would actually put in the copies of Solemn Judgment, likely replacing like the imperms, just because like this stops a lot of like threats that are harder to take care of, especially because if your opponent sees that you're playing all these floodgates, they're going to side in their lightning storms, they're going to side in their their heavy Harpies Feather Duster, evenly if they play it, even like Cosmic. So like having just ways to take care of those cards if they see you're on like 6 trap floodgates, 3 Mystic Mine, 3 Torrential, yeah, they're definitely going to want to stop that somehow. So Judgment, very, very good supplement to this. And yeah, I do believe that this was his actual list. I'm just going to go ahead and check real fast. Yeah, pretty much it. I had it in a little bit of different order here, but yeah, this is exactly the same list. Whoops. Oh, I didn't save before I swapped. But this is the same list. I'll just click sort here. Thankfully, I had it saved. But yeah, this is the list that he opted to play. He was pretty happy with it, and it operated very, very well. Again, he wasn't like very familiar with all of the matchups, so that's kind of also why like a simplified game plan would be beneficial. Just because like he hasn't had the time to learn in depth every single deck. Like we did our best to kind of get him up to speed, but that's also kind of like an advantage of playing this type of deck. But yeah, we were able to do really well, and he did a very good job. He's still very good at like navigating the striker lines. So yeah, full credit to him for like piloting the deck, because obviously you can only get so far with deck building. You also have to play well, even though deck building is very important. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like as well as any thoughts or feedback in the comment section down below. Feel free to subscribe for more informative and competitive video content. If you want to, you can follow me on Discord, Twitter, or Twitch. All the links in the description as always. And once again, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I'll catch you in the next video. See you guys.